You wouldn't let a pilot fly a plane after just watching a couple of YouTube videos, would you? Of course not. That's insane. But here's what's just as insane. We do that to leaders almost every single day. We promote individuals into leadership. We hand them the keys. No training, no development, no support. Just the illogical hope that what got them here will get them where they need to go. And then we wonder why 60% of them fail and why no one in the next generation is attracted to leadership. Let's fix that. Today, we're talking about ground school. Well, welcome back to the Frontline Leadership Podcast, where we help frontline leaders become professional leaders that transform business bottom lines in the process. I'm your host, Craig Coyle, and over the first 5 weeks of this podcast launch series, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the problem, which is that most new leaders fail. We've talked about why this happens and how to create an environment that addresses this challenge. We've made the business case, and we've talked about who creates culture and how to create environment that people are attracted to and love being a part of. Today, we're going to shift. We're going to shift from the strategic to the tactical, from the why to the how. Let's dive in. So here's where we are. You understand the problem, and that's that 60% of new leaders and managers fail within the first 18 months. And you understand the solution. It's that a systematic leader development infrastructure is the key to creating and scaling professional leadership throughout your entire organization. And you understand why this is so important. Our workforces hinge on the quality of our frontline leaders. They create our culture, and they do that through their ability or inability to influence and develop the relationships and inspire the purpose that gets us out of bed each and every day. Today, we're going to shift. We're going to talk about not just why we have to develop our frontline leaders, but we're going to talk about the first step in developing them. And to quickly jog your memory, the Lead Like a Pilot framework has 3 critical pillars. The first is flight school. We have to give them a foundation for professional leadership. The second is pre-flight. We have to help them master the routine that inspires their people and encourages them to do what they need to do in order to succeed. And third, and arguably most importantly, is progression. We have to give them the structure, the guidance in the community that not just empowers their careers as leaders, but supports the psychological transformation from individual to leader. Today, we're diving into flight school, specifically the first component of flight school, which is ground school. This is where professional leadership begins. So let me take you back to how pilots are trained. Flight school has 3 critical components. There's ground school, there's flight training, and of course, there's flight experience. But before a pilot ever touches the controls of an aircraft, they spend months in a classroom. Why? Well, pilots exist at the intersection of several extremely complex environments. I mean, think about it. They're sitting in the middle of a highly technically complex and engineered aircraft, thousands of feet above the ground, with people or millions of dollars worth of equipment on board. And they have to navigate this ever-changing environment that's the Earth's atmosphere. Oh, by the way, at those altitudes, different things can impact not just how the aircraft reacts, but how their body reacts as well. See, thousands and thousands and thousands of things are taking place each and every second, and they have to perfectly align in order for a pilot to not only be safe, but to be successful. And that results in thousands and thousands of micro decisions they're making each and every moment. It's not something that you can figure out as you go. See, ground school is a pilot's foundation. It's the very core principles and knowledge that their entire career and skill set rests upon. It's the core behind how they're going to operate both consciously and subconsciously, ultimately resulting in how they function, how they decide, how they react in every single moment. See, in ground school, pilots don't just learn random things, but they learn about aerodynamics, which is going to influence how their aircraft operates within the environment. They learn about things like systems, how their aircraft is designed and built to function. They learn about weather, how the environment around them could influence what they're doing and the decisions they have to make. And they learn things like aeromedical, like how the body reacts to different environments that they may be subject to in the aircraft. See, all these things are critical academic knowledge areas that pilots need to intuitively understand before they enter into the cockpit. And leadership is no different. We're responsible for people, performance, culture, results, all while navigating the complexity of human relationships, organizational dynamics, constant change, amongst many other things on our plates across different industries. We cannot just wing it. We can't afford to. We need to have a firm foundation. That's what ground school is for leaders. It's the foundational knowledge of leadership upon which everything else we do rests upon. Here's what I noticed most organizations miss. They'll send leaders to one-off workshops, maybe on communication skills or time management. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that organizations that do this see this level of development as something that's important for their leaders to have. But what they're missing is the fact that a lot of these workshops, a lot of these lessons, a lot of these trainings focus simply on skills. Skills are just tactics. They're useful, absolutely, but without a foundation, they fail with pressure. Let me give you a personal example. Early in my career, actually just after graduating flight school, I moved to Fort Bragg and took over an organization that was going through a pretty significant organizational change and transformation. Obviously, with that comes a lot of uncertainty. And in this specific case, there was a lot of personal uncertainty for just about every single person that was a part of this organization. Now, with personal uncertainty came the slow erosion of ultimately what was once a very high performing culture just a few months prior. Now, I'm a product of one of the world's most premier leader development institutions. Graduated from the United States Military Academy. I'm fortunate to have been developed in the United States Army as a leader. I had the management and technical skills. I knew how, and I was willing to do the work. But here's what I realized, unfortunately, too late. My foundation for leading people was cracked. Now, fortunately, it wasn't a character issue on my part, but I had some mindsets and principles that were guiding my life that ultimately ended up being the very things that limited me and ultimately made me fail as a new leader. See, my mindsets and my emotions, they were an operating system that my leadership was running on that when conflict arose, caused me to avoid it. When I failed, I crumbled. When someone underperformed, I micromanaged. When pressure mounted, I reacted emotionally instead of responding thoughtfully and intuitively. See, I had been trained in the skills and the tactics. I knew exactly how the Army expected me to manage, but I didn't have a firm foundation. And under stress, both organizational stress and personal stress that I was placing on myself, all of those skills crumble. Here's the truth. Skills and tactics fail without foundation. You can learn all the communication techniques in the world, but if you don't understand yourself, your values, your principles, your triggers, your blind spots, you'll default to reactive leadership when it matters most. Foundation is what keeps you grounded when the storms come, and storms will always come. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. That's leadership. That's why ground school is not optional. It's what separates professionals in leadership from amateurs. And only professionals create professional results. So what does ground school even look like for leaders? Well, just like pilots who learn aerodynamics, weather, systems, leaders need their own critical academics. And I believe there's 4 of them specifically that leaders need. I want to walk through those 4 right now, today. So, number 1, principles and values. This defines who you are as a leader. It defines how you act and how you make decisions. Without intentionally defining these for yourself, you are ultimately just reacting. And a house that is not built on solid rock falls when the storms come. So to be grounded and steadfast as a leader, you have to clearly define what you hold true and valuable. When you do, you're prepared to act consistently day in and day out, regardless of what comes your way. Here's a fun exercise. Take a quick glance at your schedule or at your bank account or at both. If you notice any trends, I would argue those trends are telling you what you value. At the end of the day, what we spend our time on, what we spend our money on, is what we value. In essence, our values are simply that. It's what we value, what we choose to spend our time and money on. Now, if you don't like what you're seeing, start by defining your values. What do you want your values to be? Because when we start by defining them, we give ourselves an anchor point to then audit our time and our money based off what we're intentionally choosing to want to live by. See, your values are simply the things that you value. That's it. Make intentional decision-making anchors by defining them for yourself. Now, your principles, on the other hand, are the mindsets and the subsequent thought patterns that guide how you operate. In essence, they're your day-to-day operating system. They guide who you are, how you show up in each and every moment. These are the things that crushed me as a new leader. See, I was operating under what many call a fixed mindset or a victim mindset. I needed to download a growth mindset and a hero mindset. I needed to reframe failure in my life as a stepping stone. I needed to see conflict as something that's natural and healthy in organizations, not something that I wanted to avoid at all costs. Together, our principles and our values guide everything we do in leadership. This is your opportunity, whether it's personally or organizationally, to allow them to work for you and to design them instead of allowing them or letting them to work against you by not defining them. Number 2, emotional intelligence. I would argue, and many people say, that the best leaders are often the best followers first. But I think there's a second piece to that. And I would argue that the best leaders aren't just the best followers, but they're also the best leaders of themselves before they ever step in and start leading others. This is emotional intelligence in practice. It's managing yourself so that you can manage others. You have to fully understand who you are, be in tune with yourself emotionally, and be able to regulate those emotions before you can ever effectively comprehend the emotions of others and then be able to manage your emotions around others who are emotional beings as well. Here's the key insight. When you're able to manage yourself, you can best manage how you relate with those around you. In essence, this is the key to leadership. Leadership is influence, and those who can best manage themselves have the best opportunity to be able to influence those around them. Self-awareness is the foundation of every healthy relationship. And leadership is relational. Just as pilots need to understand their aircraft and how it operates and interacts with the environment around it, we as leaders need to understand ourselves, be acutely aware with who we are and how we interact and operate with all those around us. Number 3 is broadened development. This is seeing the whole picture. Great leaders aren't just experts in their niche, but they understand how their niche fits into the greater picture. They've developed a broader understanding of their specific profession, both holistically, but also internally, and how that profession interacts with their organization as a whole. In other words, they don't just understand their piece to the puzzle, they understand how their piece fits in the puzzle, how it interacts with the pieces to the left, right, top, down of it. And they understand how each of those pieces surrounding it collectively work together to play a role for the picture as a whole. This is what enables you to lead your team beyond just simply through technical expertise. It enables you to mobilize your team as an integral component to a greater team. It allows you to transmit purpose throughout your entire team. And then it allows you to understand and support the teams around you so that your organization can truly rise the tide and accomplish everything it's setting out to accomplish. Without broadened development, teams often revert to operating in silos. But with broadened development, teams grip hands and work together to accomplish not just their individual goals, but the organizational goals as a whole. And finally, component number 4 is systems thinking. Now, if broadened development helps us understand how we fit into a greater picture, systems thinking allows us to see and understand all the different processes that take place within our team in order for it to accomplish what we need to accomplish, both efficiently and effectively. This is understanding how our team's pieces fit together, technically, operationally, logistically, you name it. In ground school, as a pilot, we're painstakingly taught the ins and outs, nuts and bolts, the drip of oil of every little piece that functions on our aircraft. Now, to some people, this seems like it's a little bit unnecessary, but the reason behind this is allows us to understand and address and identify issues before they even occur. It's ultimately the foundation of a pilot's emergency training. It allows them to prevent emergencies and it allows them to react effectively in the event of an emergency so they can mitigate the risks associated. See, when you understand how all the moving parts of your team or organization work and fit together, you're better equipped to manage and monitor them. In other words, you're more likely to lead your team to success. Now, we're not diving deep into each of these areas today. That's coming in future episodes. Today's just the overview, the introduction, the why this matters. Because before you can build these areas, you have to understand why they're so important. You have to understand that ground school is non-negotiable. Here's what ground school really represents. It's the shift from treating leadership as a role that just needs to be filled to treating it like a profession. Pilots don't just show up and fly. They study, they train, they build a foundation systematically so that when they get in the cockpit, they're ready to learn how to fly. Leadership should be no different. See, when you commit to building a ground school, to putting new leaders through a ground school, or to finding and developing a ground school for yourself, you're effectively saying, I'm not winging this. I'm preparing for this. I'm treating leadership like the profession that it is. I'm laying a firm foundation for who I am and how I'm going to operate as a leader. That shift changes everything. Because once you have a foundation, everything else in the Lead Like a Pilot framework becomes possible. It all starts fitting together. The routines, the tools, the progression, they all work because you've built them on solid ground. Without a foundation, you're managing at best. But with a foundation, with a firm foundation, you are truly leading. So here's what I want you to do today. Take a moment and honestly assess where you think you're at in each of these areas of ground school. Rate yourself, scale of 1 to 10. Be honest. Because the honesty here is going to be what allows you to chart a path forward with your own development or with how your organization develops its leaders. So how would you rate yourself? Principles and values. Have you sat down and defined them? Do you understand what your values are? Are you intentional with your values? What principles are you operating on as a leader? What about emotional intelligence? Can you manage and identify your emotions? Do you understand the emotions of those around you? Do you manage your emotions as a result of the emotions you sense around you? Do you understand how your team or how the teams in your organization fit together? Do you teach that to your new leaders? And then finally, do you understand how all the elements of your team internally function? We're going to dive deep into each of these areas in episodes in the coming weeks. But if you want help now, if you want resources to help take the next step in any of these areas in your ground school or just in your leadership as a whole, head to operationlead.com. We have plenty of resources for you there, and there are options for you to reach out to us, schedule a call as well. In closing today, here's what matters. Here's what I want you to take away. Leadership is a profession, and every profession requires a foundation. You can't skip ground school and expect to succeed when the storms come. The 4 foundation elements, principles and values, emotional intelligence, broadened development, systems thinking, they anchor you to everything else you need to succeed as a leader. Think about it. Every building requires a foundation, whether it's going to be a shed in your backyard or a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. It all starts with the foundation, regardless of what the building is meant to be. The foundation is the starting point. Well, today we introduced the core elements of a leader's foundation. And in the weeks ahead, we're going to go deeper. Next week, we're continuing flight school with part 2, flight training. This is where you take the foundation that we talked about today and start building upon it, learning the core skills every leader needs to master. Until then, remember, professionals don't wing it. They build a foundation first. I'm Craig Coyle. This is the Frontline Leadership Podcast. Let's lead.